interpreter, I'm a professional interpreter. There's a really, some of them happening now with Maltese and with Maltese English. I've invited some young students from the Malta Interpreter School at the university to come and interpret. In Brussels, we see the Maltese language being really, really bastardized. Where there must be a perfectly good Maltese word, they take an English word or an Italian word, add an ending for the verb, and it's a real impoverishment of the language. Carmel, who's in the audience, who's also a professional interpreter, might have more to say about it because he works into Maltese, and I don't work into or out of Maltese. At the same time, English, which my father was educated in, he wrote marvellous doggerel in English, marvellous doggerel in Italian, marvellous doggerel in Maltese. He really was a multilingual, and I see the English language in Malta is degenerating. It's harder and harder to recruit students for the interpreting school because they don't come up to scratch. The level of English is too poor to make them conference interpreters. And I think that the Maltese language has to be saved in some way. Maybe something like the Académie Française has to be set up in Malta to protect the language. We're not without the rigidity of the Académie, but maybe something, when there are neologisms, perhaps find a Maltese word or something with a Semitic origin and make it part and parcel of the language, because I see that the Maltese people I meet now are almost what we call in Brussels, where there are all these people with multinational backgrounds who have no depth of knowledge of any language at all. They are what we call alinguals, people who don't have a really in-depth mother tongue. And I think that writing in Maltese, it's important, it has to be preserved, because it's important for the quality of the language. That's the point I wanted to make.
Can I just say something that's related to that, but also I don't speak any Maltese, and I've been trying since I came to live in Malta 6 years ago. I've been trying to learn. I've been going to classes and so on, but I really do find it extremely difficult, especially as my brain is now old. But I want to say that the young woman who sat next to me and translated, I am just so in awe of how you did that. I really do appreciate it, because what she is doing is hearing what you guys are saying, of which is creative and original and new and dynamic, and it's going through her brain into another language, and she's saying it in a way that I can follow. I'm so impressed by that. I really am. So thank you. Yes. And in relation to place, I'm sorry, I don't want to hog things, but I really, when you were talking about place then, I want to read the prologue to my second book, which is called Songs for a Blind Date. The first book is Washing Up in Malta. I thought the first book was going to be my only book, but when I was writing it, a whole lot of other stories and things were coming into my head, so another book emerged, and now I'm working on my third book. But anyway, so this is the prologue from Songs for a Blind Date. I hear the sounds of place more clearly as I grow old, as though the earth is calling me home. Some people stay and listen profoundly to one song until they fade into the walls and become the notes that others hear. Some move on and weave new harmonies into the song of life. I wanted to hear the notes of new places and sail on a wash of sound until the rhythms carried me into deeper water, where snatches of the songs of the world rippled across the surface. Perhaps I could pick up a minim here, a quaver there, and although I can't read music, I could work the notes together in my head and listen for the music in words. The audiologist said that the ringing in my left ear was because my ability to hear the higher tones was declining in that ear. This causes my brain to become bored and invent things for me to listen to. It isn't a very satisfactory explanation, but the audiologist added that it was too early for the benefit of a hearing aid, so the ringing has become part of my song, like the droner's bagpipes from a Scottish moor. I'm just going to skip. But the songs that I hear grow louder as the middle sea of my New Ireland home swishes in my middle ear, and distant forests on the other side of the world murmur their memories. In Australia, the songs of place are strong, with rhythms of drumming rain, dry heat and crackling fire, syncopated by startling singular notes of bellbird and whistling kite. In Australia, people add their homeland songs to the ancient drone of place. My neighbour, Jake, mixed the notes that he heard with the laments of his Scottish home and made his own song as he faded into the rhythms of mud and mangrove. Ernesto lived with the clashing notes of another world, mountain without sea, mother without form. His song struggles for shape in the bark of dogs and the bitter dream of family. In Malta, the changing rhythms of the Middle Sea shaped the notes of my story into my first song cycle. The words became fixed on a page, but the music stayed in my head. When I revisited Australia, the old songs were different. Some notes jarred and some had softened. Some rang true and some were out of tune. I set to and wrote another song. Here it is.
Thank you. I'll prod you with another question. This is to do with the passage of years, whether this has affected the sense, the importance of Malta in your imaginative creativity. You know, when you are creating, whether over the years anything has changed, and related to that, whether you think that your portrait of Malta could be fixed, unchanging, nostalgic. Also related is the fact that you always write about the Malta that is past, whether you ever think about the Malta that is now.
Right. Well, I think I have developed over the years. Birds of Passage was my first novel, and I think that had a lot of nostalgia in it. I was just fresh in writing. I had interviewed many migrant women, and their stories were very fresh in my head. I remember I used to put the tape in my car, and I lived 60 kilometers away from my school where I was working, so I would listen to the women's voices as I was driving down. I drove 120 kilometers every day, so I listened to the women and listened to their stories, and they had such a strong sense of Malta. I interviewed women who were in their 60s and 70s who had migrated to Australia, you know, a long time ago, and their sense of place was very strong. So Birds of Passage has a very strong sense of place. But I think as my writing developed up to my 6th novel, I think my last one has moved away from Malta, and it's more Australian. The Maltese people I have in my last novel look back on Malta, not Bushfire Summer. In Bushfire Summer, I write about a child migrant who was sent to Australia. And he looks back to Malta, not with nostalgia, but with anger and a bit of hatred, I suppose, because, you know, he's got this feeling that Australia has stolen his childhood and Malta has chucked him out, so he is a confused person. And maybe that's how I see Malta, in my mind. You know, there's a confusion in my mind because I visit Malta every year, and as I move away from Malta and closer to Australia, I feel there is this, how would I say, there's a war within me, in my mind. I'm leaving one place and forcing myself into another place. And there is a struggle in me. And I think it comes out in my writing.
So you feel gradually closer to Australia.
Yes.
Would you think that your children, were they to become writers, would Malta figure?
No, I don't think so, because they see themselves as Australian. They've come to Malta, they've gone to Slovenia. Well, my children are you know, they're dual citizens. Well, they're more than dual, they're triple citizens. You know, they're descendants of a Maltese, descendants of a Slovenian, and they are Australian. But they see themselves as Australian. And I don't think they would write. My daughter is a filmmaker, and she's more interested in Aboriginal place, and her sense of place is very Australian.
I see. Would you like to respond to the passage of years and how?
Also, to keep to time, I'm just going to read a paragraph, which was the abstract for the paper for tomorrow, because it sort of addresses this. And I must say I'm backwards looking. And that's also because my guides and mentors in Australia are right across the board, all age groups. I work with differently able children and with University of the Third Age and talk in primary schools, but it's the Indigenous people who are the leaders in their area who have helped me the most. And the strange thing is, even though I would never compare my vicissitudes here in a post-colonial Malta with theirs, which included mass murder, funnily enough, they recognize that I'm another victimized post-colonial person. You know, even before I tell them that I couldn't speak Maltese at school because, you know, I'm punished for it. My Maltese heritage was an advantage when researching and writing The Lake's Apprentice, which is the name of my book. My volume of nature notes, essays, poetry and photographs has been critically recognized as a significant contribution to the growing genre of place-based literature in Australia. What has been called my book's respectful post-colonialism, significantly in a genre of writing which engenders ecological ethics while also acknowledging Indigenous history and environmental knowledge, was grounded in my own experiences. I never set out to position myself as a post-colonial writer. I didn't even know the phrase until I read it in a review. Born in post-war Malta, I was born in 1950 after a childhood in Africa, England and Central America. I lived on the island continuously from the age of 10 to 34. On migrating to Australia, I was an adult with Maltese cultural, social, spiritual and educational formation. And I was conscious of a cascade of losses, personal, creative